I bought my brother a house, $770,000. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, a yard with a maple tree, he said reminded him of the one Mom used to sit under. He held the wedding in it, and I wasn't invited. My name was on the deed. Not his, mine. So, while they were cutting the cake in a house I paid for, I was on the phone with my realtor. And what the bride did when she found out made every single person in that family go silent. I bought my brother a house and he uninvited me from the front door. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. I'm Ingrid, 32 years old, a bookkeeper from Asheville, North Carolina. I spent 10 years being the responsible one in my family, paying bills, covering shortfalls, buying my brother a house he couldn't afford. This is the story of how I got uninvited from the front door I paid for and what happened when I took it back. If you've ever given more than you got, subscribe and drop a comment. My mother, Ella Lehner, died when I was 22. Pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. She was 53. My father Roy sat in the recliner the night of the service and cracked open a Budweiser, and I don't think he ever fully stood back up. Derek was 19, still sleeping until noon, still calling Mom's name when he wanted lunch. Somebody had to keep the lights on. Somebody had to make the mortgage payment on the family house in Laurel Ridge. Somebody had to drive Derek to his community college orientation and then pick him up 6 weeks later when he dropped out. That somebody was me. I worked 2 jobs. Days at a tax prep answering phones, nights stocking shelves at a grocery warehouse outside Asheville. And I enrolled in night school for an accounting degree because I figured if I was going to spend my life managing other people's messes, I might as well get paid properly for it. 4 years. I finished that degree at 26 with no student debt because I paid tuition semester by semester out of a savings account I kept in a shoebox app on my phone, transferring in $40 or $60 every time I could spare it. By then, I was already sending Derek $300 a month for rent, groceries, gas, whatever emergency he manufactured that week. Mom told me before she died, sitting up in that hospital bed with the morphine drip and her reading glasses still on like she was about to balance her own checkbook. Look after your brother. You're the strong one. I took that literally, maybe too literally. But when the person you love most in the world asks you something with their last real breath, you don't negotiate the terms, and you don't ask for a receipt, and you carry it forward, even when the weight starts pressing on your spine at 3 in the morning. Derek wasn't a villain. I want to be clear about that. He was my younger brother and he had Mom's smile. And when he was 13, he used to bring me hot chocolate while I studied because he said my brain needed fuel. The problem was that Derek never learned the connection between effort and outcome because I kept bridging the gap for him. He got a bartending job at 20, lasted 8 months before he quit because the manager didn't respect his ideas. He moved into used car sales, lasted a year before they fired him for fudging mileage numbers on trade-ins, which he described as creative accounting, which as an actual accountant, I found personally offensive. Then a warehouse job, 6 months, quit because the shifts were inhumane, meaning they started at 7 in the morning. Every single time the phone would ring, I'm a little short this month. A little short meant $400. A little short meant his rent plus his electric bill plus the payment on a truck he couldn't afford. I sent it every time. Derek wasn't bad. He just never had to be good because I was always there to cover the difference. And here's the thing about being someone's safety net. After a while, they stop seeing the net and they just see the air beneath them and they think they're flying. Dad made it worse. Roy would call me and say, "Your brother's going through a rough patch." Like Derek's entire adult life wasn't one continuous rough patch with scenic overlooks. Roy never told Derek to get it together. Roy never sat him down and said, "Son, your sister is 26 and she's supporting 2 households on a bookkeeper's salary." Roy cracked another Budweiser and said, "He'll figure it out." Derek did not figure it out. My father retired from the textile factory at 58. Not by choice. His knees gave out and the company offered a buyout package and Roy took it because fighting would have required energy he no longer had. He collected a small pension and Social Security. He kept the old house in Laurel Ridge, a 3-bedroom ranch that Mom had made beautiful with thrift store curtains and window boxes full of marigolds. And he let it slowly fall apart around him. Paint peeling, gutters sagging, the marigold boxes empty. Every evening, same routine. Recliner, remote, Budweiser, bed. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't abusive. He was just absent. Like someone had pulled the plug on him when Ella Laner died, and he'd been running on residual power ever since, flickering, but never fully on. He loved Derek in the way that required no action. Derek was loud. Derek was present. Derek showed up and needed things. And needing things looked like closeness to a man who had forgotten what real closeness felt like. I was the opposite. I didn't need anything from Roy. I called on Sundays. I asked about his blood pressure. I mailed him a check when his truck needed a water pump. I was invisible infrastructure, the plumbing and wiring that kept the house standing while everyone admired the paint color. My father didn't dislike me. He just forgot I was there, which honestly hurt more. Dislike is a relationship. Dislike means someone has to look at you long enough to form an opinion. Roy looked through me like I was a window with a decent enough view that he never quite focused on. Derek got the hugs and the phone calls and the "how's my boy?" I got the silence between Sunday check-ins and the quiet assumption that Ingrid was fine because Ingrid was always fine. 2 years ago, Derek lost the warehouse job and got evicted from his apartment in the same month. Apparently, he'd been 3 months behind on rent and had been hiding the notices under his bed, like a kid stuffing a bad report card in a backpack. Roy called me crying. Actually crying. First time I'd heard that sound from him since the funeral. "Your brother's on the street, Ingrid. He's sleeping in his truck." I drove to Laurel Ridge that weekend. Derek was indeed sleeping in his truck, parked in Roy's driveway, eating gas station burritos, and looking like a kicked golden retriever who still somehow expected a treat. I could have given him money for another apartment, first and last security deposit, maybe co-sign a lease. But I had been patching Derek's roof for a decade, and I was tired of patches. So I found a house. Laurel Ridge, 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, a yard with a maple tree, listed at $795. I negotiated to $770. I put down $154,000. 8 years of savings from a woman who packed her lunch every single day and drove a 2014 Civic with a cracked dashboard, and I kept the deed in my name. "Here's the deal," I told him, sitting at Roy's kitchen table with the purchase agreement printed out. "You live here, you pay the mortgage, $3,900 a month. When you've held a steady job for 2 years and you've made every payment on time, I'll transfer the deed." Derek nodded like a man being handed a golden ticket. He shook my hand. He hugged me. He moved in the following Tuesday and told every friend, neighbor, and acquaintance. Finally got my own place. He never mentioned my name, not once. Caitlin Torres walked into Derek's life about a year after he moved in. She was 27, an ICU nurse at Mission Hospital in Asheville, and she had the kind of steady, clear-eyed calm that comes from watching people fight for their lives on a 12-hour shift, and then driving home in rush-hour traffic without braking. She'd put herself through nursing school, paid her own way, no family money, no shortcuts. Her parents, Gloria and Marco, ran a landscaping business in Hendersonville, and her sister Sophia was finishing up a teaching degree at Western Carolina. Solid people, real people. Derek brought Caitlin to the house for the first time on a Saturday afternoon, and I know this because he called me the night before to make sure I wouldn't randomly stop by. He walked her through the front door, showed her the kitchen with the granite countertops I'd picked out, the master bedroom with the walk-in closet, the backyard with the maple tree. "This is my place," he said. And Caitlin believed him because why wouldn't she? She was standing in a beautiful house with a man who was smiling and proud, and she didn't know there was a deed in a filing cabinet in Asheville with a different name on it. I visited 2 weeks later. Caitlin was there. Sweet woman, direct. She shook my hand and said, Derek's so proud of what he built here. It's really impressive. I looked at Derek. Derek looked at the floor. Later, after Caitlin left, I told him he needed to tell her the truth. He leaned against my granite countertop and said, when the time is right, I will. The time was never right. The time was never going to be right. Because the truth would have made Derek ordinary and he had finally found someone who thought he was exceptional. Derek proposed 8 months later down on one knee under the maple tree. Caitlin said yes. I heard about it from Roy, who called me on a Tuesday evening. The most animated I'd heard him in years. Your brother's getting married, Ingrid. Can you believe it? I could believe it. What I couldn't believe was the plan. The wedding would be at the house. Backyard ceremony under the maple tree. Caitlin loved that tree. She told everyone it was where Derek first said he loved her, and she wanted to say her vows in the same spot, surrounded by family and the home they'd build a life in. The Torres family came for a dinner at the house. Gloria and Marco drove up from Hendersonville. Sophia came from Coy and they sat in the living room I had furnished with my credit card and ate dinner at the table I had paid for and told Derek what a beautiful home he had. Marco shook Derek's hand and said, a man who can buy a house like this is a man who can take care of my daughter. Derek said thank you. He did not say anything else. 6 weeks before the wedding, I drove to Laurel Ridge. I sat Derek and Roy down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd laid out the purchase agreement 2 years earlier. Tell her the truth, I said before the wedding. She deserves to know. Derek crossed his arms. It's not the right time. Roy looked at his Budweiser. Your brother knows what he's doing. I drove back to Asheville on I-40 with the windows down and my jaw clenched so tight I could hear my MERS grinding over the radio. 6 weeks. The call came on a Wednesday. I was at my desk reconciling accounts for a roofing company when Derek's name lit up my phone. I picked up expecting another request. Money for the caterer maybe, or a question about whether the property insurance covered event liability because Derek wouldn't have known the answer to that since Derek didn't know he didn't have property insurance because the property wasn't his. Hey, he said casual, easy, like he was calling to ask about the weather. So, listen. Caitlin and I have been going through the guest list and we're keeping it small. It's only for the closest family. I let that sentence sit in the air between us. I let it breathe. Derek, I said, I'm your sister. I know, but it's Caitlin's day, and we want it intimate. And honestly, you two aren't that close, so it'd be weird. I hung up. I sat there for 11 minutes. I know because the clock on my monitor ticked from 2:14 to 2:25. And then I called Roy. Dad. Derek says I'm not invited to the wedding. Silence. The sound of a can opening. It's only for the closest family. You understand? That was my father. The man I'd been sending checks to for a decade. The man whose water pump I'd paid for. The man who forgot I existed until something broke. I said, I understand, Dad. And I did. I hung up and 3 minutes later, Derek texted me. A single short line and a yellow smiley face. It's only for the closest family, followed by that grinning little emoji like he was telling me the restaurant was full and I should try the place next door. I sat at my desk. The roofing company's receivables were still on my screen. I minimized the spreadsheet. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept my personal documents, the mortgage papers, the deed, the title insurance, the home inspection with my signature on every single page. I picked up my phone. I called Helen Park at Park Really. Helen, I need to list a property. I gave her the address. She pulled it up. Ingrid, this is the house your brother lives in. Yes. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. It's only for the closest family. Fine. The closest family was about to find out whose name was on the deed. If you've ever given everything you had to someone, your money, your time, your savings, your sleep, and still didn't earn a seat at the table, then you know exactly what that emoji felt like. You know how it lands when the people you carried decide you're not close enough to stand beside them. Drop a like if you've been there, because this story is just getting started. Helen Park was 61 years old and had been selling real estate in western North Carolina for 30 years. She was not the type of woman who gasped. But when I walked into her office the next morning with the deed, the mortgage statement, and the title insurance policy, she looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Walk me through this one more time." I walked her through it. Bought the house 2 years ago. Deed in my name, brother living there. No lease agreement, no rental contract, no written arrangement of any kind, just a verbal deal that Derek would pay the mortgage and earn the transfer, which he had not done because Derek had not held a job for more than 5 months in the 2 years since he moved in, and I had been covering every payment from Asheville. Helen set the papers down. Ingrid, North Carolina requires a 30-day notice to a residential occupant before you can require them to vacate, even without a lease. I know the wedding is in 4 weeks. She looked at me. I looked at her. She understood. You want me to list it? Today. And the notice? Certified mail. Send it today. She pulled up the MLS on her computer. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, Maple Tree, Laurel Ridge. She ran comps. We can list at 7 hours 85 minutes. Market strong. I signed the listing agreement at 10:47 in the morning, sitting in Helen's office with a cup of black coffee and the absolute clarity that comes from being pushed past your limit by the people who were supposed to be closest to you. The certified letter, 30-day notice to vacate, went out that afternoon, addressed to Derek Mears at the property address. Sincerely, Ingrid Marie Myers, owner. Marcus Webb was a real estate attorney in Asheville with a corner office, a bow tie collection, and the demeanor of a man who had seen every possible way a family could tear itself apart over property and had stopped being surprised approximately 15 years ago. I sat across from him with the deed, the mortgage, and the listing agreement, and he went through each one like a surgeon examining an X-ray. The deed is clean. Sole owner Ingrid Marie Myers. No liens except the mortgage which is in your name. No co-borrower. And Derek? Derek has no legal claim to the property. He's an occupant without a lease. The 30-day notice is the correct procedure. He paused, adjusted his bow tie. Ingrid, I need to ask, are you sure about the timeline? The wedding is in 4 weeks. The notice arrives this week, 30 days from delivery. Which means the notice period expires around the wedding date. I'm aware. Marcus leaned back in his chair and looked at me with something that wasn't judgment and wasn't sympathy, but lived somewhere between the two. Understood. Helen called that afternoon. The listing went live at 2 o'clock. By 5 o'clock, she had 3 showing requests. 785, the house was beautiful. I had made sure of that when I bought it because if I was going to spend my entire savings on a gift for my brother, I was going to make sure it was a good one. 3 showings on day 1. Meanwhile, in Laurel Ridge, a certified envelope was making its way through the postal system, tracking number recorded, delivery confirmation requested, addressed to a man who was probably at that very moment picking out napkin colors for a wedding reception in a backyard he didn't own. Derek and Caitlin were deep in wedding prep. I know this because I still followed Caitlin on social media. She hadn't done anything wrong, and I had no reason to block a woman whose only crime was believing my brother. She posted photos of the backyard strung with twinkle lights. She posted a picture of the maple tree with a white fabric arch being assembled beneath it. She posted a boomerang of Derek hanging a welcome to our forever home sign above the front door. And I stared at that one for a long time. The Torres family drove up from Hendersonville the following weekend. Gloria and Sophia helped Caitlin arrange centerpieces in the dining room. Marco walked the property with Derek, inspecting the fence line, discussing where to put the portable bar for the reception. I could picture Derek out there, hands in his pockets, nodding along, playing the part of the homeowner who'd worked hard and earned every square foot. "Took me a while to save up," Derek told Marco. "I know because Caitlin posted a quote about it. My fiancé worked so hard for this house, our dream home." I closed the app. I opened the mortgage statement instead. $3,900 due in 12 days, and I would pay it because the house was still mine and the credit was still mine, and Derek hadn't covered a single payment in 4 months. Somewhere in the middle of the centerpiece arranging, Caitlin mentioned me. I know because Sophia posted a story. Caitlin asked about Derek's sister. She said, "I wish I could meet her." Derek just shrugged and said, "We're not close. We're not close from the man living in my house." While my certified letter was in transit, 3 days from delivery, riding in the back of a postal truck somewhere on I-26. Helen called on a Thursday. Cash offer $779. Buyer wants it too close. I was sitting in my apartment, a 1-bedroom in West Asheville with a window that faced a parking lot and a kitchen so small I had to turn sideways to open the refrigerator. I paid $1,100 a month for this apartment while covering a $3,900 mortgage on a 4-bedroom house in Laurel Ridge where my brother was planning a wedding I wasn't allowed to attend. "Ingrid, you there?" "I'm here. Take the offer." 2-week close puts us at Saturday. "Which Saturday?" Helen paused. "Wedding Saturday." I did the math. Sale price $779,000. Outstanding mortgage roughly $590,000. Closing costs, commissions, transfer taxes approximately $34,000. Net equity to me around $155,000. My original down payment had been $154,000. I was going to come out almost exactly where I started, except I'd also spent 2 years covering mortgage payments that Derek was supposed to handle. So really, I was coming out behind. But $155,000 in my account was better than $770,000 in a house that had become a monument to my brother's lies. "Proceed," I told Helen. "I'll prepare the paperwork." I hung up. I looked around my apartment, the parking lot view, the sideways kitchen, the desk in the corner where I did freelance bookkeeping on weekends to cover the gap between my salary and Derek's mortgage. I didn't sell the house to punish my brother. I sold it because it was mine. Because I'd sat in that title office alone 2 years ago and I'd signed my name on every document and I'd handed over a cashier's check with my entire financial life compressed into 5 digits and I had done all of it alone. It was my house. I was allowed to sell my house that night. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and I remembered Derek at 13 bringing me hot chocolate while I studied. I remembered him at 10:00 crying because the kids at school said his sneakers were old and Mom sitting him on her lap and saying, "Those shoes walked you to me this morning and that makes them the best shoes in the world." I remembered him at 19 standing at Mom's graveside in a suit that didn't fit. Looking like a boy wearing his father's clothes and how I put my arm around him and promised that I would take care of him. The maple tree in that backyard. He chose the house partly because of that tree. He said it reminded him of the one Mom sat under in Roy's yard reading her paperback mysteries on summer evenings while the fireflies came out. I almost called Helen. Almost said, "Cancel the sale. I'll figure something else out." And then I picked up my phone and scrolled back to Derek's text. "It's only for the closest family." With the smiley face, that yellow grinning, dismissive little circle that reduced 10 years of sacrifice to a minor inconvenience. I put the phone down. I turned off the lamp. The closing would happen. The sale would go through. And if Derek wanted to stand under that maple tree and say his vows in a yard owned by a stranger, that was his choice. But it was my name being erased from a deed at the county recorder's office, not his. And I had earned the right to decide when my name came off a document I had signed and paid for entirely on my own. I slept fine after that, first full night in weeks. The next evening, I pulled the original purchase folder from my filing cabinet. I hadn't opened it since the closing 2 years ago. Everything was there, organized with the color-coded tabs I use for all my financial records because I'm a bookkeeper, and this is what bookkeepers do. First tab, the purchase agreement. Buyer, Ingrid Marie Myers. Address listed as my apartment in West Asheville. Signed, dated, initialed on every page. Second tab, the home inspection report, 26 pages, my signature at the bottom of each one. I remembered the inspector, a guy named Dale, who smelled like coffee and had opinions about roof ventilation. I remembered standing in the empty house alone, walking the rooms, checking the windows, opening every closet. Derek wasn't there. Dad wasn't there. Just me and Dale and a clipboard. Third tab, the down payment receipt, $154,000, cashier's check drawn on my account at First Citizens Bank. The teller had asked me if I was buying the house for myself, and I'd said for my brother. She smiled and said, "That's the nicest thing I've heard all week." Fourth tab, the title insurance policy. Sole owner, Ingrid Marie Myers. No co-owner, no beneficiary designation, just me. I sat at my desk in my one-bedroom apartment, and I held those documents in my hands, the physical proof of every dollar I had earned and saved and handed over. And I thought about Derek's text again. It's only for the closest family. The closest family. But the closest didn't sit in the title office. The closest didn't sign 26 pages of inspection reports. The closest didn't hand over a cashier's check that represented 8 years of packed lunches and weekend freelancing and a cracked dashboard Civic and a parking lot view. I bought my brother a house. He uninvited me from the front door. The documents told the rest. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday. I know the exact moment because my phone buzzed with the USPS delivery confirmation at 11:23 a.m. And 14 minutes later, Derek called. I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring. He called a third time. And when I didn't answer, the text started. What is this? You can't sell my house. This is a joke, right? Call me back now. I waited an hour. Then I replied with one text. It's not your house. It never was. Check the deed. 20 minutes of silence. Then you're bluffing. I didn't respond. Derek called Roy. Roy called me. I picked up because I wanted to hear what my father would say when the infrastructure started showing. Ingrid, your brother is upset. He says you're selling the house. I am. You can't do that. That's his home. It's my house, Dad. My name on the deed, my money for the down payment, my credit on the mortgage. Your mother would be disappointed in you. I let that one land. I let it sit in my chest for exactly as long as it needed to. And then I said, Mom would have read the deed. Roy hung up. I set my phone on the desk. I don't know what happened in Laurel Ridge that afternoon, whether Derek paced the living room or punched a wall or sat under the maple tree and tried to figure out how his safety net had suddenly developed a hole in the center. What I know is that he made a decision. He decided not to tell Caitlin. He decided to bet that I was bluffing, that I wouldn't actually sell the house out from under him 2 weeks before his wedding, that the sister who had spent 10 years catching him would catch him one more time. He bet wrong. Wedding week. 2 timelines running parallel 68 miles apart. In Laurel Ridge, Caitlin was arranging flowers, white roses, baby's breath, sprigs of eucalyptus. She posted a video tour of the backyard, the white chairs and rows, the fabric arch under the maple tree, a hand-painted sign that said, "Best day ever." Leaning against the fence. She looked happy. Genuinely happy. And I felt something complicated about that. Something I didn't have a clean word for because Caitlin hadn't done anything wrong and the bomb headed her way wasn't meant for her. In Asheville, I sat in Marcus Webb's office on Wednesday and signed the closing documents. Sale price $779,000. Buyer, a retired couple from Charlotte who wanted a weekend place in the mountains. The closing was effective Saturday. Title transfer, deed recording, the whole thing. Time to Saturday because that was when the buyer's funds cleared and the title company could file. Helen would send her team to post the sold sign evening 5 o'clock. The ceremony was at 3. I signed every page. Marcus notarized. The title agent filed the paperwork for Saturday recording. I drove home. I made dinner. Grilled chicken, brown rice, steamed broccoli, the same thing I made every Wednesday because routine is how I survive. And I sat at my kitchen table and ate alone and thought about Caitlin arranging roses in a house that would belong to strangers by the end of the week. 2 timelines, 2 women who didn't know each other very well, both doing exactly what they believed was right, 68 m apart. One of us was going to have a very bad Saturday. I already knew which one, and it wasn't going to be me, and I wasn't proud of that. But I wasn't sorry either. Friday before the wedding, 7 o'clock in the evening, a knock on my apartment door, hard and fast. And when I opened it, Derek was standing there in a wrinkled polo shirt, unshaved, eyes red. He'd driven an hour and a half from Laurel Ridge. "Please," he said. "The wedding is tomorrow." I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around my apartment, the parking lot window, the narrow kitchen, the desk with the filing cabinet. And for a half second, something crossed his face that might have been shame. It passed quickly. "You can't do this to me. It's done. The house sold yesterday." His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "Sold to who?" "A couple from Charlotte. Closing is tomorrow." "Tomorrow is my wedding." "I'm aware." He grabbed the back of my desk chair like he needed to hold on to something. "Mom would be ashamed of you." I looked at my brother, my younger brother, who I had fed and funded and housed and protected for 10 years, standing in my apartment that was a quarter the size of the house I'd bought him, telling me our dead mother would be ashamed. "Mom would be ashamed of both of us," I said. "But at least I'm not the one who lied." His face changed. The charm drained out of it like someone had pulled a plug. "I'll tell everyone you're crazy. I'll tell Caitlin you're jealous and bitter and you're trying to ruin my life. Tell them whatever you want, Derek. The county recorder's office has the truth. It's all public record." He left. Slammed the door hard enough to rattle the chain. I locked it behind him. I sat down at my desk. I opened the roofing company's receivables file. I had work to do. Saturday morning, June in the Carolina mountains, 78 degrees by 9 o'clock. The kind of day that makes you understand why people move here. In Laurel Ridge, Caitlin Torres was getting ready in the master bedroom of a house that had 12 hours left as my property. Her sister Sophia was doing her hair. Gloria was steaming the dress. The Torres women were laughing and crying and taking photos. And I imagine it was beautiful because Caitlin deserved a beautiful morning. In Asheville, I went to work. Saturday clients, 2 small businesses that needed monthly reconciliations. I sat at my desk at the tax office and I processed invoices and I reconciled bank statements and I drank black coffee and I did not think about the maple tree. Helen texted at noon. "Sold sign going up at 5 p.m. Teen will be there." I replied. "Understood." The ceremony was at 3. I know this because Caitlin had posted the timeline on her social media weeks earlier. 3 o'clock p.m. I do with a heart emoji. At 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon under a maple tree in a backyard that belonged to me for 2 more hours, Derek and Caitlin said their vows. I do. I do. Rings exchanged. Kiss. Applause. Gloria cried. Marco shook Derek's hand. Sophia threw flower petals. The photographer captured it all. The arch, the tree, the chairs, the couple, the golden afternoon light filtering through the maple leaves. They got married in a yard I paid for under a tree I'd fallen in love with during a showing I'd attended alone, in front of a house I'd bought with 8 years of my life. And not a single person standing in those white chairs knew that the woman who owned it all was 68 miles away entering receipts into a spreadsheet. Imagine watching someone say, "I do." In a house where your name is on every document, the deed, the mortgage, the insurance, the inspection report, and knowing they chose that house as the backdrop for their love story while choosing to erase you from it. If you've ever been written out of a story you built with your own hands, hit like. And if you're wondering what happened when that sold sign went up, keep listening. The reception kicked off around 4. Backyard, string lights, a portable bar near the fence where Marco was pouring champagne like a man who believed his daughter had married well. The caterer set up stations along the patio, pulled pork sliders, a mac and cheese bar, a 3-tier cake with white buttercream and lavender sprigs. Caitlin changed into a shorter dress for dancing. Derek loosened his tie. The photographer circled the yard capturing candids. Gloria laughing with a champagne flute. Sophia dancing with a cousin. Roy sitting in a lawn chair at the edge of the party with a Budweiser watching his son with something that looked like pride but was probably just relief that someone else was handling Derek now. The toast started around 4:30. Gloria stood up and said, "To this beautiful home they'll build their life in. To Derek who worked so hard to give my daughter a place to call their own. And to Caitlin who deserves every bit of this." Everyone raised their glasses. Derek smiled. I imagine it was his best smile, the one that had been getting him out of trouble since he was 6 years old. 5 o'clock, while the dancing continued in the backyard while Derek spun Caitlin under the string lights while the maple tree cast long shadows across the lawn, Helen's team pulled up to the front of the house in a white Park Riley van. They walked to the edge of the lawn. They planted the sign. White background, navy text, Helen's logo at the top, sold. It went into the ground at 5:07 p.m. Nobody in the backyard noticed. They were too busy dancing, too busy celebrating, too busy building a future on a foundation that had just been sold out from under them. The party wound down around 7. Guests started drifting toward the front of the house, collecting purses and jackets, saying goodbye, hugging the couple on the porch. Most of them walked right past the sign without registering it. They were full of champagne and pulled pork and the pleasant fog of a good party. But Sofia Torres was 23 and chronically online, and she stopped at the curb to take a selfie with the house behind her because she wanted to post it with a caption about her sister's big day. She held up her phone, framed the shot, smiled, looked at the preview, then looked past her own face to the thing planted in the front yard. She lowered her phone, walked to the sign, read it twice. "Derek," she called, still facing the sign, her voice carrying that specific pitch that happens when someone is asking a question they already suspect the answer to. "Derek, is there a sign on your lawn?" Conversations on the porch stopped. Marco set down his champagne glass. Gloria turned. Derek, who was standing in the doorway with his arm around Caitlin, went pale. Not gradually, instantly, like someone had reached inside him and turned off the blood supply to his face. "What sign?" he said. Everyone moved to the front yard. The whole wedding party. The whole Torres family. Roy with his Budweiser. The photographer still snapping because photographers never stop. They all gathered on the front lawn of a house that no longer belonged to anyone standing there, and they stared at a white and navy sign that said sold in letters large enough to read from the street. The string lights were still on in the backyard. The cake was still on the table. The maple tree didn't care. Caitlin walked to the sign in her reception dress, the shorter white one with the lace hem, barefoot because she'd kicked off her heels during the first dance. She read it out loud slowly like she was reading a chart in the ICU and needed to make sure she had the numbers right. Sold Park Riley Helen Park Broker. She turned around. Everyone was watching her. Derek was standing on the porch with his hands at his sides and his face the color of old paper. "Derek." Her voice was steady. "I see you steady." The voice of a woman who tells families their loved one didn't make it and does it with clarity and compassion and no wasted words. "Is there something you want to tell me?" It's a mistake. Wrong property. Must be a mix-up. Whose name is on this house, Derek? Silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. Full of every lie stacked on top of every other lie, swaying like a tower of plates in a restaurant kitchen, one breath from collapse. Who's named Derek? Gloria stepped forward. She put her hand on Caitlin's shoulder. Marco was behind her, his landscaper's hands clenched into fists. He wasn't going to hit anyone. He just needed to hold on to something. Is there something you need to tell us? Gloria said, and her voice was the opposite of steady. It was shaking, the way a voice shakes when a mother realizes her daughter may have married a lie. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I can explain. That's what people say when they can't explain. That's the universal preamble to a lie that hasn't been assembled yet. Caitlin stood barefoot on the sold lawn in her wedding dress and waited. It's a scam, Derek said. He was talking fast now. The charm engine running on fumes, producing words at a rate that suggested none of them had been vetted by the part of the brain responsible for plausibility. Someone's running a scam. Fake sign. Wrong property. I'll call the police. Caitlin didn't move. Then show me the deed. What? The deed? Derek, if this is your house, show me the deed. You have it inside, right? In a filing cabinet or a safe or a drawer. Derek's mouth worked. No sound came out. Show me the deed. It's at the bank. They keep the original. No, they don't. I bought my own car. I've seen how paperwork works. Show me the deed. He couldn't. He couldn't show her the deed because the deed was in a filing cabinet in a one-bedroom apartment in West Asheville, filed under property Laurel Ridge with a color-coded tab because the owner was a bookkeeper who organized everything. Caitlin looked at him, and I think that was the moment the tower of plates came down, not with a crash, with a slow, horrible tilt. I've seen people lie on their worst days, Derek. Patients who swear they haven't been drinking when their liver is failing. Family members who say they'll be fine when they won't. I know what it looks like. She paused. And I'm looking at it right now. Derek's face crumpled. Gloria was crying. Marco had his arm around her. Sophia was standing with her phone at her side, not filming, just standing because some moments are too ugly for a screen. And somewhere in the back of the group, Roy sat in his lawn chair with his Budweiser and said nothing because saying nothing was the only thing Roy had ever been reliable at. It's only for the closest family. Sunday morning, the wedding flowers were wilting in the backyard. The cake sat half-eaten on the patio table, icing softening in the mountain humidity. Caitlin hadn't slept. She told me this later. She had spent the night in the guest bedroom with the door locked, and Derek had knocked twice and she hadn't answered. At 6 o'clock in the morning, while the house was quiet, she opened her laptop. She went to the Buncombe County Register of Deeds website. She typed in the property address. The search took 4 seconds. The record came up clean and clear, the way public records do. No drama, no emotion, just facts filed in a government database by a clerk who had no idea what those facts would eventually destroy. Owner, Ingrid Marie Myers. Purchase date, 2 years prior. Purchase price, $770,000. Sole owner, no co-owner, no transfer. Caitlin sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once laid out the purchase agreement for Derek. The same table where the Torres family had eaten dinner and told Derek what a beautiful home he had. And she stared at that screen. Then she closed the laptop. She carried it to the living room where Derek was on the couch, still in his wedding shirt, unbuttoned, looking like a man who had been up all night rehearsing explanations and had rejected everyone. She put the laptop on the coffee table. She opened it. She turned the screen toward him. You told me you bought this house. Derek looked at the screen, looked at Caitlin, looked at the screen again. The county recorder's office doesn't lie. It doesn't charm. It doesn't say when the time is right. It just sits there in black and white and tells the truth that everyone else was too afraid or too comfortable to tell. Derek stared at the screen for a long time. Caitlin stood over him, arms crossed, still in the oversized t-shirt she'd worn to bed, her wedding dress hanging on the back of the guest bedroom door like a ghost of the day before. Ingrid was going to transfer it to me, he said finally. Once I was stable, that was the deal. You told me you bought it. You told my father you put 20% down. You told my mother this was what you built. I was going to earn it. You didn't earn it, Derek. You didn't even try. He put his face in his hands. The couch cushion dipped under the weight of him folding in on himself. Did you uninvite your sister because you were afraid she'd tell the truth? The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. I could picture the ripples moving outward across the living room through the kitchen out into the backyard where the white chairs were still set up in rows and the maple trees stood witness to a ceremony built on sand. Derek didn't look up. Yes, barely a whisper. The most honest thing my brother had said in 2 years, spoken into his own palms in a living room full of furniture he didn't pay for on a morning after a wedding that shouldn't have happened in a house that was never his. Yes, I uninvited her because I was afraid she'd tell you. I was afraid you'd leave. Caitlin uncrossed her arms. You were right to be afraid. She walked back to the guest bedroom. Derek stayed on the couch. The county records page glowed on the laptop screen, patient and permanent. Ingrid Marie Myers, sole owner. The truth had been there the whole time, filed and indexed, waiting for someone to look. Caitlin called her family. Gloria, Marco, and Sophia arrived within the hour. They'd been staying at a rental cabin 10 minutes away, and none of them had slept much either. They walked into the living room. Derek was still on the couch. He'd put on a clean shirt, which struck me as the most Dirk thing imaginable. Even in total collapse, he thought about the presentation. Caitlin stood in the center of the room and addressed her family with the composure of a woman delivering a clinical report. Derek didn't buy this house. His sister Ingrid did 2 years ago. Paid the down payment, took the mortgage, kept the deed in her name. Derek was supposed to earn the transfer by holding a job and paying the mortgage. He did neither. Silence. Marco stepped forward. He was a big man, broad-shouldered from 30 years of hauling sod and stone. And he stopped about 3 feet from Derek and just stood there. You told me you put 20% down. You looked me in the eye at this table and you said, it took me a while to save up. I shook your hand. Derek opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Was any of it true? Any of it? Sophia spoke from the doorway. The sister who wasn't invited to the wedding. That's the one who actually bought this house. Yes. Caitlin said his sister Ingrid bought the house and Derek uninvited her from the wedding because he was afraid she'd tell us the truth. Gloria sat down heavily in the dining chair. She didn't say anything. She just looked around the room, the crown molding, the hardwood floors, the kitchen with the granite countertops, and saw all of it differently now. Every surface, every wall, every fixture rewritten in an instant. Not Derek's. Never Dirk's. Here's what I've learned about truth. You can hide it from people, but you can't hide it from documents, deeds, records, receipts. They don't forget. They don't get charmed. And they don't care about your feelings. If you've ever watched the truth come out after someone tried to bury it, drop a comment and stay with me because Caitlin called me next. My phone rang at 11:14 on Sunday morning. I was at my kitchen table eating toast, reading the news on my tablet, living the quiet life of a woman who had just detonated a bomb 68 m away and was now waiting for the shrapnel to settle. The caller ID said Caitlin Torres, not Caitlin Myers. She hadn't changed it. Maybe she never would. Ingrid, Caitlin, I looked up the deed. I know. I searched the county records this morning. Your name is on everything. It is a long pause. I could hear someone in the background. Gloria, maybe, or Sophia. The sounds of a family regrouping around a daughter who had just discovered her marriage was built on a forgery of character. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Your boyfriend's sister shows up and says, actually, he doesn't own the house. I do. Would you have believed that? Or would you have thought I was jealous and bitter like Derek told you? Another pause. He said you were difficult. I'm not difficult. I'm a bookkeeper. I like things to be accurate. The smallest sound. Not quite a laugh, but close. Something cracking at the edges. I'm sorry you're caught in this, Caitlin. I didn't sell the house to hurt you. I know exactly who this is about. It's about Derek. It's about Derek. And it's about you, and it's about the fact that you gave him everything and he gave you nothing, and then he locked you out of your own front door. I didn't say anything for a moment. Nobody had ever said it back to me like that. Clean, clear, without hedging. Thank you for saying that, I said. Thank you for answering the phone, she said. Caitlin walked back into the living room. I just talked to your sister. Derek flinched like she'd thrown something at him. The Torres family was still there. Gloria in the dining chair. Marco standing against the wall. Sophia in the doorway. Roy was outside sitting in his truck in the driveway because Roy had never known how to be in a room when things were hard. She bought that house for you, Caitlin said. Paid the entire down payment. Took the mortgage in her name. Covered every payment you missed, which was most of them. Derek stood up from the couch. I was going to pay her back. With what? You haven't held a job for more than 5 months. I was trying. Trying? She's been living in a 1-bedroom apartment with a parking lot view while you hosted dinner parties in a house she bought you. She kept the deed because you weren't stable enough to be trusted with it. And she was right. Marco stepped off the wall, stone-faced, the muscles in his jaw working like he was chewing on words he wouldn't let himself say in front of his daughters. Derek turned to him. Marco, I wanted to be someone you'd be proud of. I wanted Caitlin to see me as. I was proud of you. Marco's voice was low and controlled, the way a strong man's voice gets when he's keeping everything bottled. I was proud of you, Derek. I told my wife. I told my friends. I told my crew. My daughter found a good one. A man who works hard. A man who built something. He paused. Before I found out it was all a lie. Gloria reached for Marco's hand. Sophia looked at the floor. Derek had nothing left. No charm, no excuses, no house of cards, just a living room full of people seeing him clearly for the first time. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight to it, that presses on your chest and makes the clock on the wall sound like a hammer. Caitlin was the one who broke it. We did have a home, Derek. Your sister's home. She gave it to you. She trusted you to earn it, and you kicked her out of it. Derek sank back onto the couch. I didn't kick her out. You uninvited her from her own property on her own front lawn while she was paying the mortgage from an apartment she could barely afford. Sophia spoke. She's been paying the mortgage while living somewhere else. Yes, Caitlin said. Every month for 2 years. For 2 years. Sophia shook her head slowly. The way you shake your head when math reveals something that emotion tried to hide. Gloria stood. She was a small woman, but she filled the doorway when she moved to it. She looked at Derek with the particular expression of a mother who is not looking at her own child, but at the person who hurt her child. And there is no expression on earth more final. Caitlin walked to the kitchen. She pulled off her wedding ring, a simple band, white gold, modest, because Caitlin was not a woman who needed flash. And she placed it on the granite countertop. The countertop I had picked out during a showing I'd attended alone. I'm going to my mom's house, she said. Marco turned to Derek. My daughter deserved the truth. She deserved it before the ring. She deserved it before the vows. She deserved it before she moved her life into this house. The Torres family walked out. Car doors, engine, gravel, gone. Derek sat alone in a house that wasn't his. The call came that evening, 8:30. The sky outside my apartment window was that deep Carolina blue that happens in June when the sun has just dropped behind the mountains, but the light hasn't given up yet. Ingrid, it's Caitlin. I know. I left him. She said it's simply the way you report a fact. Blood pressure is 120/80. The patient is stable. I left him. I'm at my mom's house. I took my clothes and my nursing bag and I left. I'm sorry, Caitlin. Don't be. You did me a favor. The words hung there and I felt something shift inside me. Some weight that had been pressing on a load-bearing wall since the day Derek texted me. That smiley face. Not relief exactly. Recognition. How long did you carry him? She asked. 10 years. 10 years. And he uninvited you from the house you bought him. He did. I would have sold it, too. Quiet, both of us breathing. A nurse and a bookkeeper, 68 m apart, connected by a man who had lied to both of us and a house that neither of us would ever live in again. You know what gets me? Caitlin said. I fell in love with him in that backyard under that tree. I thought it was real. The tree was real, I said. Yeah, the tree was real. I sat in my apartment after we hung up and I felt understood for the first time in as long as I could remember. Not pied, not managed, not needed, understood by a woman I barely knew who had looked at the same set of facts and arrived at the same conclusion without anyone having to explain it to her. I didn't sell that house to punish Derek, I sold it because it was mine. Because 10 years of carrying someone doesn't mean they get to lock you out of your own door. Because the people who call themselves your closest family should probably act like it before they use the phrase on a text message with a smiley face. Because I sat in that title office alone and I signed those papers alone and I paid for everything alone. And alone is fine when it's a choice. But alone is something else entirely when it's imposed on you by the people who owe you the most. I bought my brother a house. He uninvited me from the front door. So I sold it. And the bride understood. 3 days later, a Tuesday evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. Soft this time, not Derek's frantic hammering. I opened it and Roy was standing there. My father, 61 years old, old flannel shirt, faded ball cap from the factory he hadn't worked at in 3 years, standing on my welcome mat with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders curled forward like he was trying to take up less space. I heard, he said. I stepped aside. He walked in and looked around my apartment, the parking lot window, the narrow kitchen, the desk in the corner with the filing cabinet, the bookshelf with my accounting textbooks, the small couch where I watched TV alone on Friday nights. He was seeing it for the first time. My father had never visited my apartment, not once in the 4 years I'd lived there. He stood in my living room and he turned in a slow circle and I watched his face change as the math landed. This was where his daughter lived. This was the life she could afford after spending everything on his son. He sat down on the couch, took off his cap, held it in his hands. Your mother, he started, and then stopped, looked at the cap, looked at me. I saw something in his face that I hadn't seen since the night before Mom's funeral. A flicker of the man he used to be. The father who taught me to ride a bike. The husband who slow danced with Ella Laner in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. It lasted about 2 seconds. Take care of yourself, he said. He stood up, put the cap back on, walked to the door, almost turned around. Almost. Bye, Dad. He nodded. Walked down the hall. I closed the door almost as the story of my family. 2 months later, Derek lost the house. The new owners moved in 3 weeks after closing. And Derek had nowhere to go. He moved back into Roy's 3-bedroom ranch in Laurel Ridge, the one with the peeling paint and the empty marigold boxes and the recliner that held the shape of Roy's body. He got a bartending job at a place near the highway. Different bar, same pattern, but at least he was working. Caitlin filed for annulment fraud. Under 60 days of marriage, which made the legal process simpler. The Torres family cut Derek off completely. Marco wouldn't return his calls. Gloria blocked his number and Sophia posted a story that said, "Protect your peace." With a sunset background, which I suppose was her generation's version of slamming a door. Caitlin went back to her apartment in Asheville, the one she'd kept when she moved into Derek's house, because some part of her had apparently maintained an exit strategy, which told me something about the instincts of a woman who works in the ICU. She was back on her shifts within a week. As for me, $155,000 net from the sale. I paid off my remaining $22,000 in student loans. I put the rest in a high-yield savings account and didn't touch it. I kept my apartment. I kept my job. I kept my cracked dashboard Civic. I kept my life exactly the way it was, except lighter because I was no longer carrying the mortgage for a man who'd told me I wasn't close enough to stand in his backyard. Caitlin and I met for coffee once about 6 weeks after everything, a place on Hwood Road. We sat at a small table by the window and drank lattes and didn't talk about Derek much. We didn't become friends, but we understood each other. Sometimes that's enough. A Thursday evening late, I was at my desk working through a personal budget spreadsheet, the same one I'd kept since night school, updated every month, every dollar tracked and categorized with the discipline of a woman who learned early that money is just organized trust. The apartment was quiet. The parking lot was dark. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk to file the monthly statement. And underneath the folders, I found a photograph I'd forgotten was there. My mother, Eleanor, sitting at her little desk in the kitchen of the Laurel Ridge house, the desk where she paid the family bills by hand, writing checks with a ballpoint pen, keeping a ledger in a spiral notebook because she never trusted computers with money. She was smiling in the photo, reading glasses on, pen in hand, the desk lamp casting a warm circle around her. I held the photograph for a while. There, Mom. We're both working late. I put it back in the drawer. I thought about the maple tree. I thought about Derek at 13 bringing me hot chocolate. I thought about Roy standing in my apartment with his cap in his hands, almost saying the thing he needed to say. I thought about Caitlin barefoot on the lawn in her wedding dress, reading a sold sign with the calm precision of a woman who processes bad news for a living. And then I thought about a text message with a smiley face. Being generous doesn't mean being disposable. And the people who treat your sacrifices like furniture are always the most shocked when you take them back. A house worth $770,000. A wedding where the owner wasn't invited. A bride who found the truth in county records and a brother who learned that closest family can't be just the people who take. It has to include the ones who give. If this story hit close to home, share it. Comment what you would have done and subscribe to Calm Drama Stories. I'll see you in the next one.